When you hear the name Shaquille O'Neal, a couple of things probably come to mind right off the bat. Maybe it's basketball, maybe it's a giant, maybe even some of his amazingly branded products, but one thing that I'm sure didn't come to mind is Kung Fu. But believe it or not, back in the early 90s, Mr. O'Neal partnered with EA to make an amazing game titled Shaq Fu. But we're not here to talk about Shaq Fu. No, what we're actually here to talk about is its sequel, Shaq Fu: A Legend Reborn. A game with a disastrous and turbulent history, a lack of planning, and fingers being pointed at everyone except for the man at the top. So let's begin all the way back in March of 2014. The Indiegogo campaign for the game has just gone live with a goal of $450,000. This was quite an interesting campaign to say the least. For starters, the studio's name was Big D's Productions. I'm sure we all know what that's referencing. Their little subheader read, "We won't foo it up this time," most likely referring to the original game's glowing reviews, such as Shaq Fu includes everything a good fighting game needs with the exception of good fighting. I mean, just take a look at the Game Boy release, like god damn. Promise amazing features and gameplay, compare your music producer to Jesus Christ himself, and of course offer the chance to work with the studio if you paid them a decent chunk of change. Although it may seem pointless for some to go through the rewards, we need to at the very least take a look at some of them, as they are a very vital part of the entire story. So for $5, you'll get a little thank you and a nice little trading card and your name in the credits. For $55, you can choose between a shirt that reads "We won't foo it up" or "Make foo not war," whatever the hell that even means. For $150, you could submit your own voice to have it be featured in game. Can you just imagine being able to list Shaq Fu on your IMDb credits? Maybe Chris Pratt can voice Shaq next time. Other small things I didn't mention but you should keep in mind are a golden SNES cartridge, signed merchandise, and limited edition cosmetics in game. But now we can move on to the balling category. Literally, for $15,000, you can ball at Shaq's Shack and even have a dinner with the big man himself. It's kind of funny how you could have just done this if you waited until around the end of the campaign for just $3,000. Unfortunately, nobody claimed that though, so Shaq must have had dinner with himself that day. And lastly, for $35,000, you could have Shaq DJ at your party. They probably had the night of their life listening to the Shaq Fu in-game soundtrack. But I'm sure many of you have probably already guessed or have known, but the campaign was funded successfully at $458,000. But interestingly, that number actually used to be $473,000 as mentioned in this little community post. However, at some point, about $15,000 seemed to have vanished into dust, most likely due to refunds, as we'll get into. It seems that a lot of the rewards that included the big man himself were added in for the sake of raising money with no real idea as to when they could even fulfill them. They had to make a post stating that due to the playoffs, they had very little of Shaq's time, and that didn't seem to change up until I assume August, as that was the last time they even mentioned the big man himself and how they said he was just busy. So I'm hoping all the backers that paid big bucks received their promises, though I of course don't have proof as to whether or not they did. Either way, it seems that these weren't the only perks that they were having trouble delivering, as many people were finding themselves without the shirts or trading cards they paid for. It would soon come out that the reason the shirts were delayed was because even after 5 months since they started the campaign, they were just barely getting the rights to the Shaq Fu logo. Seems like something you should have done much sooner, no? I can only assume they wanted to see if the campaign would even succeed in the first place before doing anything else. But hey, they at least stated that the t-shirts were now thankfully being shipped. No specific mention on the trading cards, golden cartridges, or the other merchandise yet though. At least not until January of 2015, where they stated that not only were the cartridges and merchandise almost ready, but also that the game would be released within that same year, despite the fact that they were still basically at ground zero. Literally, they barely just got their first working prototypes in January and didn't have one fully complete level up until August. I know game dev takes a lot of time, but you shouldn't promise something like a release so soon when you aren't anywhere near a completed state. They also posted their Facebook page where they were asking for script, story, and character suggestions as they were writing their very first draft, which went down as well as you'd expect. This one just says LeBron James DLC with Larry Bird skin pack. But again, something that should have been done much sooner, probably even before the campaign started, for crying out loud, at least in my opinion. I will admit they did later state that the original story had to be rewritten from scratch because it was basically too offensive given the time period, which I mean, if you're going to make a game for the mainstream, maybe lay off the edginess a little bit so that, you know, that problem doesn't fucking happen. Anyways, they didn't have the first draft of the script ready until April, which again only slowed down development as there were still multiple checks to be done to ensure quality. Also in August, they put out a little casting call asking for all voice actors and voice over tier backers to record their lines and send it in to get yourself featured. Though, of course, this only caused more problems because the people who purchased the voiceover tier weren't even responding to their emails. But we soon find out that it really doesn't matter if you responded to those emails whatsoever, because once the game released on June of 2018, backers quickly realized that their voices were nowhere to be found. Not only that, but many of the backers' names weren't placed in the right section in the game's credits, or were just missing outright. Like, it was nowhere to be found. I just have to say, there's someone they said his name never ended up in the game. His name was fucking Joey Shabadoo. It sounds like something the fucking Flintstones would say. It was around this time too a new Facebook group emerged known as Shaq Fu Indiegogo supporters, documenting many of the backers' unreceived perks and obvious frustration. Along with the comment section of the Indiegogo campaign, we can see that many people weren't receiving not only their copy of the game, but also their fucking t-shirts. The thing they promised over 3 years ago now. Not to mention one backer didn't even have his character featured in-game despite paying for the concept art tier, and apparently those limited edition cosmetics were literally nothing more than 3 of Shaq's fucking songs. Why did they think anyone would want that? Let's be honest here.
They think I'm on the brink of my insanity.
Of course, Little D's Productions had to respond to this with the actual last post they ever made on Indiegogo. They claimed that the reason for the cut voices was due to issues Shaq's management had with the game, which I'm assuming means that they were mad that there were too many goddamn voices in the game. There were 121 voice acting tiers claimed, by the way, which if you multiply by 150 comes out to roughly $18,000. Which is where I'm assuming most of that campaign money went, as there was no way in hell people weren't going to ask for their $150 back. At least I think. I don't know if it was already too late at that point. Anyways, let's move back into the Facebook group. People were obviously frustrated with the lack of promises and deliveries and began attacking a man known as Oliver. Why him? Well, because his name was plastered at the end of each post, meaning he must have been the creator and the reason backers were basically robbed with nothing to show for it. They began insulting him, leaking his phone number, and even tagging companies he worked with to get him both fired and blacklisted from the industry, which of course is never the right thing to do. He ended up joining the group in order to defend himself, claiming that he was nothing more than just an employee. He was hired later on to write the script and manage the perks within the campaign. And I'll be honest, I believe him, simply because no post up until the end of the campaign ended with Oliver's signature, leading me to believe he really wasn't hired until around the end of the campaign, most likely as a fall guy in case things went south, which they most definitely did. Other than that though, the group was mostly just people complaining about not at the very least having their name written in the credits. But realistically, I don't think you want your name associated with this thing because it is an absolute abominable mess of a game. For starters, the game's story this time around started off with Shaq being a fucking Chinese orphan found in a river who gets bullied so much that he's taken under Master Roshi and learns the way of Kung Fu. I compare Yi over here, that's literally his name. I compare him to Master Roshi because that's literally who they modeled him after. He's just a perverted sensei who is also a real fucking weirdo.
This is why you had me wax your lips.
Okay. Listen, I'm not one to get offended easily with these kinds of jokes, but if you're going to include them, can you at least make them fucking funny? This was my face throughout my time playing the game. I was just so bored. They even made a slight jab at the backers with one of Yi's voice lines, saying that he wasn't fighting alongside Shaq because they didn't raise enough money to animate him, which kind of just sounds ungrateful considering these guys had $450,000 to work with, which would have probably been enough had they just planned this shit out at all. But the rest of the game is literally just walk right, spam punch, maybe throw in a move every now and then, and literally rinse and repeat. There's nothing more to it. The boss fight was literally just hit this guy, watch him spin, hit him once he stops, and do that again and again until he dies. It's so fucking boring. I wish I could tell you guys if the game gets any better, but after beating the first boss and seeing I was about to do the exact same thing again, I just gave up and went to sleep. Oh my god, more! I'm sorry, I can't. This shit's boring as hell. This game literally zapped away all of my fucking energy. Sorry to the 5 remaining Shaq Fu fans. This game is just not funny or fun in general. Anyways, soon after, the Facebook group died down quite a bit. At this point, backers either received their rewards or just really didn't care anymore at this point. Sometimes you just have too much faith in something or someone and are only left betrayed. It's a natural part of life. I'll leave you guys with this last comment that basically summarizes the sentiment felt by almost every backer. This game's production frustrated me to no end, even even 5 years later. Borderline fraud. 5 years and I still can't shake how much Shaq Fu fucked people over. Clearly, they did Fu it up again this time. Jesus, that sounded so fucking bad. To those of you that are familiar with the Indiegogo, you'll notice that I skipped through a lot of the rewards that people didn't get. That was just mainly because I wanted to get to the ones that I felt were more important. There was also mention of a class action lawsuit against Big D's, but there's no proof that ever existed. I'm pretty sure that rumor might have started because on the Facebook group, they were genuinely talking about starting a lawsuit, because obviously this is basically just borderline fraud. In the end, this entire Indiegogo campaign was more of a lie than anything. Is it a scam? To some degree. Obviously, it's borderline fraud, as the guy said, but there's obviously a lot of like leeway and shit when something like this. But I mean, it's been quite a while, so I don't think the story matters anymore. I'm just here to bring it to light because I don't see many people talk about it anymore. Anyways, that's about it for this video. If you liked it, subscribe, like, comment down below your secret fighting technique or whatever. I turned on memberships and supers for my channel. If you wanted to support me, all the money will obviously go into making better content, but of course it's not necessary whatsoever. Don't worry, the pennies I'm going to earn from YouTube ad revenue is more than enough for me. On a serious note though, YouTube I guess technically is my job now, even though I'd probably find more money looking down the street. But I still wanted to thank every single person that has made that even a possibility, so thank you guys so much. Especially Ellie, who's been with me since literally the beginning. They're an old subscriber of mine who is actually the reason I never gave up on this channel back when I still made speedrunning content. If it weren't for them basically hyping me up with every video I made, no matter how shitty it was, I would have already given up by now, so I just wanted to give them a little shout out. All my socials in the description, feel free to check them out. If you want to see what I look like for whatever reason, my Instagram is in there now. One of the pictures is me in 8th grade and now, or well, senior year last year. So anyways, I've been Shaquille O'Neal. You've been watching Shaq Fu, trademarked of course, and ciao ciao.